Hey there, dear tech fam. Today we are diving deep with someone who's basically the Swiss Army knife of product building. Raj Singh has been acquired 4 times. Yes, 4. He currently leads the new product initiatives at Mozilla and just launched Solo, an AI assistant specifically designed for freelancers and small businesses. But here's what caught my attention. Raj doesn't just build products, he builds products that get bought because they solve real human problems. We're talking about smart calendars that Salesforce couldn't resist, a recipe community that dominated Android, and now an AI tool that might just change how millions of service providers run their businesses. Buckle up because Raj is about to drop some serious knowledge about going from zero to acquisition multiple times over. Let's jump into it. All right, Raj, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so I'm going to jump right into what you're building with Solo, because I think it represents something bigger happening in the AI space, and I think so far when people are building products, or if someone wants to make it big, they always go for B2B, try to hit enterprise, get the big clients. But there's a shift happening because of AI where we're moving more towards B2C, solopreneurs, whatever you want to call it. So can you give us a little rundown about what's going on with Solo, and then why do you think, for the most part, it is an underserved community? And do you see a shift happening, or do you think they're still underserved? And yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two comments there. I think there's the solo part, and there's also your comment about consumers. Um, as somebody who's been building consumer startups my whole career, I have never seen so much appetite for consumers to pay for stuff. Usually they look for
Okay.
free software, and we're
Mhm.
seeing them pay for various forms of vibe coding tools, and it's actually quite amazing to see because this is like just a new unlock because it's always been historically for consumer, you have to some ad monetization kind of model or sell your data or something of that nature. And so that's kind of an orthogonal point and happy to dive into more of that later. But with respect to solo, I was during COVID, I was trying to build all these kids a lot of kids were stuck at home where I'm based in the Bay Area during, for a large part of COVID. And, uh, uh, I was like, oh, how can I help some of these kids who are stuck at home? Let me help them learn how to play chess. And so I was going to set up a website, and I think I went to Wix and then maybe WordPress, maybe Squarespace too. I don't recall. And I just was like surprised, like how difficult it was. I think I spent maybe like 45 minutes, and I was like, whoa, there's a lot. Like there's just a lot of fidelity, a lot of editing, and I don't think I ever ended up publishing it. And so fast forward, my company was acquired by Mozilla, and I was watching or I was reading Yahoo Finance, and I saw um, this ad that basically said like the fastest growing business in the U.S. is the solopreneur, the freelancer, the person, the side hustle, and it really got me thinking. I'm like, wow, that makes perfect sense, right? If you look at COVID, side hustle, people want to be their own boss, do their own thing, take control, etc. People working from home, whatnot, and I realized like, oh, what if there's an opportunity to marry Gen AI for this audience for this segment, and what does this segment need? And so that's kind of where Solo started, kind of playing on my previous experience and looking at how to marry Gen AI. And then taking a step further, now at Mozilla, we've built out an entire, what we'd call like a small business studio or small business focus area where we're looking at ranges of tools that we can provide this audience because there's many, many ways we can help accelerate and improve solopreneurs in sort of getting them taking care of all the busy work so they can focus on their passion or their business or what they really love.
And so, like, okay, so let's speak to, because I'd love to hear about all the different, because I went on the website. Obviously, I looked at what Solo does, and it's really cool. So can what like, and I understand from reading into it what separates it, but what changes from like using the other website building tools that are out there that are a little bit more intuitive now, and I'm sure like Solo is much more intuitive in terms of actually using Gen AI. But what's the distinctions, and do you guys see you're being copied now a little bit maybe from like either Wix or Squarespace?
Yeah, so I think the reality of anything you build, there's a very short window, right? And then what works gets copied immediately, right? And so I think when we started, it was extremely novel. Um, it's truly a no code experience. Now when I think of the market map, or like how I sort of segment the different players, you have the Wix, Squarespace. You have sort of like, let's say, one end of the spectrum, actually even further beyond that, which is like the Ruby on Rails, the React, like roll your own, right? Like full blown, you're an engineer, you want to build a web application. Then you have like something between sort of like code and low code, with some optionality for no code. And that's kind of like where Wix, Squarespace, WordPress are sort of falling into those sort of buckets. Initially, I would have said 2 years ago, they weren't really no code. Like you had to have some technical chops to make those things work. They're trying to get there. I think they're reacting a bit. Now we have this new bucket of just like pure low code, which is like the Bolt, the Lovables, the Replit agents, the Vercels, all the vibe coding apps. But those that have built websites with vibe coding apps, certainly you can build a prototype and a design, but if you actually try to add anything interesting, it'll start breaking down. If you don't have some technical chops, like if you have some technical chops, you can figure it out. But a lot of these folks don't have any technical chops, right? There's a reason there's an entire web agency ecosystem, right? And then there's like pure no code, like make it dead simple, and that's kind of where we think of Solo. Now, of course, today, and this is not surprising, it's starting to bleed, right? Like you're seeing that with Gen AI, with even our individual roles. I actually call that the super IC. Our job functions are bleeding across roles, and now the tools are starting to bleed. But I think the key here in a situation like this is to stay really true to what your thesis conviction is, because one of the challenges when you do start to bleed is you start to fail what I call the WAMO test, which is word of mouth optimization, which basically is, can 5 different people describe what they use your product for in the same way? And I think people identify and think of apps in a certain way. Like this has always been Facebook's problem. Like you open up the Facebook app, you think of the feed and you think of your friends, but it's got so much other stuff in there. It's got events and it's got local and all that. And so often they would launch it as a separate app, but it's very difficult to build a separate app and to build another brand. So they try to bring it back. It certainly doesn't get anywhere near the usage it would get if it was a completely orthogonal brand launched by somebody else that was solely focused on that one thing. And that's why many large companies will do acquisitions, because acquisitions, it's a standalone brand focused on a singular thing. So I think at Solo, we're trying to stay very focused on trying to enable that solopreneur to get growth. I mean, the job to be done here is I want to grow my business. So the first step is, and when I did all the sort of user research, talked to a lot of small business owners, and often that first inflection point when they're thinking about growing their business is, I need a website, I need a business email, I need to figure out how to do ads, I need to get like business collateral maybe, right? Like I need to start doing more social media. Like I need to turn what was my grassroots Instagram page or my Facebook group or my WhatsApp friends or whatever into like something that feels more legit.
It's funny because I'm in the process of spinning my own talent agency, and I was building a website. I want to say like a month and a half ago, and I open up Solo's website. I'm like, damn it, like god damn it, this is exactly what I was looking for, because we're working on like Squarespace. It's not even just code or like the basics of understanding. Like I put words here, I put a picture here. It's, does it look good? What's design? What are color palettes? Like all these things of like, outside of just the code or the putting the website together, is like, does it look good? Is it functional? What makes it functional? All those different things. I had no clue. I had to like eyeball it and send it to friends and be like, does this look good? And then keep, going back and forth. And as soon as I got on your website, I was like, fuck, I missed it. Like this would have been so much easier.
We took it even further than that. And this is the narrative or the story arc that I really want to convey, is when you, so in 2002, 2000, if you wanted to launch a website, it was actually quite technical and quite expensive. You would have to go and get a rack. You would have to go to a data center. There was a lot of these data centers basically in cities. You could go rent a space. You'd install this rack. You would have to install Linux onto your, rack computer. You would have to basically set up an Apache web server. You would have to you'd have your website there. It was, and then of course you would have to go buy an SSL certificate from somewhere else. And domain names were not nearly as cheap. There was only a few registrars at the time, right? And you'd have to do all this work, and bandwidth wasn't cheap. So if you were doing a lot of video, it was like terribly expensive. I remember early days of YouTube, like very early days, it was like millions of dollars a month they were spending on bandwidth. That equivalent cost today is probably like dollars, right? And then look at it in 2025, right? SSL certificates are free, right? That it's like, let's, there's a, what is it? I'm blanking on the name, but like, um, not free SSL, not Let's Encrypt, I forget. But the, Mozilla has a little group that kind of spun out, sort of help push that forward. But SSL certificates are basically free. The cost of domains have drastically dropped. Certainly, if you're buying something from a specific country or specific registry or whatever, fine. The bandwidth costs have massively dropped, right? Like, and so you start looking at that and you go, why are most of these website builder products charging 15, 25, 35, 50? I mean, you use Wix and Squarespace, you can easily get to $100 a month. It's crazy. And the reason is because because these companies are so old, they were built on a business model where there was a fixed cost, but now they can't let it go. And so one of the things I like to think about when it comes to solo is Robinhood had this incredible insight in like 2015, 16. They're like, hey, you don't actually call a stockbroker anymore when you want to do a trade, right? And I know this because I remember being in high school and hearing my dad call a stockbroker, like on the phone in the 90s. That's what they had to do. But I was like, who calls a stockbroker? Basically, the cost of executing a trade has gone to almost zero, right?
Yeah.
So they asked a very fair question. Why are people paying $7 a trade on like E-Trade or whatever the different systems were? Because it was a legacy business model. And I'm a big believer in this concept, like your margin is my opportunity. And so I think what Robinhood did was they disrupted the business model. They said, hey, we're just going to make it free. Like you don't have to pay for trades. And of course, all the incumbents had to react. And with Solo, we did the same thing. So Solo, I believe, it may not be still the case today, but is the first website builder where you can connect and host your custom domain for free. All right. There's just simply nowhere else you can do that. Right.
Yeah.
And we don't have all the hidden fees and all the craziness and all that garbage that you often have to go through with clicks and emails and whatnot that try to extract more hidden dollars. And, it's very, very sort of core to our Mozilla, ethos here. Of course, then the natural question is, how do we make money? We are planning to launch a paid tier, but it's not going to be for connecting your custom domains to help drive growth for your business, right? Which is much more aligned with what the job to be done. So I like to say that we are Robinhooding the space with Solo because we're going right after their incumbent existing business model. And frankly, the only reason the growth hasn't been hyper growth yet, it's really more about driving just the awareness. We haven't done any PR or anything like that, but it is growing. I mean, this year, we 5x'd our daily growth. So the number of websites we have per day.
Wow. It's funny because when I went on the site, I saw it said it was free, but in my mind, I'm not going to go through it, but there's definitely like somewhere where they're going to throw, and I'm just like, wow, that's pretty epic. And now I'm like, all right, can I switch over? Maybe I'll just move everything over. Anyway, I'm not saying I will, I'm not saying I won't, but it's very interesting to think about.
Even crazier, the average small business website, if you look at Wix and Squarespace, most of the websites are not big web application. Most of the websites are people's homepages, blogs, small business websites, restaurants, whatever. These websites don't get a lot of traffic, that's a different conversation, but the average small business website is getting less than 50 visitors a month. The average restaurant website gets a few hundred visits a month. The actual bandwidth cost to Wix or Squarespace for serving 100 page views on one of those sites, maybe less than a penny, probably not even a penny, less than a tenth of a penny. Like I can tell you Solo, every 50,000 sites maybe costs us like a couple $100 in bandwidth cost, right?
Wow.
Because small business sites don't get a ton of traffic and traffic is cheap now. And so you think about this, that $40 a month they're charging is like 99% margin, right? Because the actual cogs on the business, like the OpEx, is like really low.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny to think about because I feel like even when I was making mine, I was like, people think, or if you don't have a business and you don't have a website, people think, oh, the website drives the business. Like, no, the website's there so I can say I have a website. But generally, the other stuff is me going out there and actually building the business. So you saying that there's not a lot of bandwidth, that makes total sense because that most people aren't using their website to build the business.
Again, so one of the reasons people create a website is, one, they want to create some legitimacy. It is your digital business card. Two, they want something they can control. The problem
Yeah.
with social media and feeds, you don't know what it's going to look like. You don't know. Facebook changes the algorithm, whatever, right? You don't want to be dependent on that. You want somewhere you can point to that you have full control. Um, However, it's only the first step. It's not going to magically solve growth. I would say one of the most common support queries we get about Solo is, hey, how do I get on the first page of Google? Right. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I send them a support article, which is like,
Yeah.
here's some tips, go integrate Google Search Console, go integrate Google Analytics, et cetera, et cetera. But like, it's hard. Like, it's really, really hard. Right. And I tell them, I'm like, you should not be thinking about your website as tons of organic growth. I mean, you can get there. It might take a long time, but you can get there. But you really should be thinking about it as a place you can send your existing customer base to, and hopefully lean on things like word of mouth, paid advertising, existing social media, and you can point them to this destination. But organic discovery through Google, it's a tough game.
Yeah, and I think websites, it always comes down to like you like because they're hoping that Google will bring customers to them, as opposed to in reality it's you bringing your website to the customer. Like, here's
Hmm.
more validity of what I do, but you have to do that. It's like it's not the first step; it's more the second step or the third step.
Correct.
And people miss that sometimes. But I want to jump back to the consumer's willingness to pay, because I feel like it's really funny because what happened even with something, let's say like ChatGPT, right? Like, you have a free version. They all have a free version. You try it and it's cool, but then fifth or seventh or ninth try, you get this error message, and you're like, "Fuck this! I don't want this error message. $10. Let's do it. $20." So my question becomes: are we seeing that the consumers are now more likely to purchase because the free alternatives either aren't good, and or like, are we creating the like is ChatGPT creating the environment for people to be willing to spend the $20 by having the error message? Like,
So
which
I
one is it
think
more
I
of?
think there's a few things going on, and I think we're still in the early part of the curve. So we have to see how this plays out. Now, historically, consumers don't pay for anything. That's always been, over a long enough time horizon, right? So, like, a good example that kind of validates this, if you look at a long time horizon, is things like Netflix. Even where things like music streaming might end. A lot of people pay for video streaming entertainment, right? They pay for Netflix or whatnot, but they did introduce an ad-supported model, right? Because they wanted to kind of lower the price point, so to expand their base. They kind of even recognize like, hey, there's some huge chunk of the market I can't get. Now the question is, what does that look like in terms of it driving more upsell to a premium tier, or it bringing some of the premium tier back to their ad-supported tier? And certainly they're probably making more money from those ads than they are even at the premium tier cost, because the ads pay well, right? So um, this is always the historical precedent is consumers just don't really pay for stuff. They try to avoid paying for things or whatnot. Of course, I will also call out there's a lot, the consumer subscription industry, like, or whatever you want to call it, the machine, the system is heavily based on breakage. So people are subscribed to things and they forget that they're unsubscribed. Like, this is
Mhm.
like the business model of like Intuit, right? Like they have like products like GoDaddy, right? They have products that you're subscribed to that you forget you're subscribed to, right? And it's like not crazy dollar amounts. It'll be like $20 a year or something of that nature. And
Yeah.
then you just leave it and forget it. And you don't want to dispute it and fight it. And unsubscribe is not easy. You have to make calls. Intuit, I think, is famous for this with TurboTax or something of that nature. I don't know which product it was, but you have to like, or not Intuit, sorry, Adobe. I think it was Adobe was famous with this. You have to go through like ranges of like
Yeah.
steps to get to an unsubscribe step, and then you have like pre-penalties and this and that, whatever, right? And of course, there are consumer protection, privacy, etc. laws that are coming to hopefully ameliorate some of this. We will see, but
Yeah.
that is the dream, that's the hope, and that's probably a big threat to a lot of SaaS businesses. Just to be clear, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of there's a lot of design and engineering that goes into those gray patterns.
It's funny because I know for a fact that Adobe, what you're mentioning, is like they would be like, oh, get 6 months free and then pay whatever. And then if you weren't gonna pay, if you were like remembering to cancel the first thing, well, there's two other things that you didn't know that was also part of that initial trial that wasn't being highlighted. Or like I remember GoDaddy, I think it was GoDaddy. It was one of those companies, and this is back in like I would say the late 2000s, where it's like you didn't know this, but you've been paying, like you said, $50 a year because after the first year you didn't renew, but there's this other thing. And it's not like you're getting emails per se, sometimes you're getting physical mail that you're not even opening,
Right.
right? Because back then it was a lot of that happening as well. It's kind of like what happens with like storage units. People get storage units, just forget.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more.
So let's ignore breakage for a second. So now ChatGPT has shown consumers paying for stuff I've never, at a level I've never seen before. Like amazing, right? And obviously Gemini and all these different products have launched their own. Now, I would argue for the vast majority of uses, like they're getting to the point where their free version is perfectly fine. Like
Mhm.
you can go to Google and you can run a search through Gemini and like it's perfectly fine. However, they play, and this is the funny thing about consumer, and I always think it's like you have to break everything down to core vices and like Maslow's, hierarchy and
Hierarchy of
whatnot, right?
needs.
Yeah, exactly, right. They play on this notion of like, what is ChatGPT ultimately doing? It makes you feel smart. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what an LLM is doing. It makes you feel smart. It's answering a question, and all of a sudden you can engage in some conversation you know nothing about. It brings you into a meeting, and all of a sudden you know things. And there is a psychology around, ooh, for a very small amount of money, I can be smarter. I can sound smarter. I can be more intelligent, right? And so it's interesting just thinking about how that plays out, right? And like this perception of like upgrade and you get the most advanced model, right? And
Mhm.
there's very specific language that's often used here. It's like most advanced, like experts, fractional PhDs. It's done by design. I mean, there's some marketing behind this, but it's playing on psychology that um I'm for $20 a month, I can sound smarter to my friends. Like interesting. Like, so I wonder how much of that stuff sort of plays into me continuing to pay for things. When the free version might actually be very similar in terms of the
Yeah.
answers, but you don't know. It's very hard to contrast because it's not like, it's not like numbers like this the Boolean A and B equal the same, right? You can't tell because the text is different every time. So in very nature, the product itself makes it difficult to evaluate if something is better or worse. Um, I think the other thing I would call out is I don't know how much of the spend in this category is AI tourism, but it is substantial. There is a substantial amount of dollars being spent to try products out,
Mhm.
not by consumers, but expensed corporate credit cards. And it's massive. Like, it is massive. Like, literally every company in the world has fear of Gen AI disrupting their business,
Mhm.
believes their teams are not super ICs, they're not upskilling or using Gen AI enough, and thus will be disintermediated. And has basically instructed their teams, if the teams aren't doing it themselves with their own agency, to go and use more tools and figure out where it can be impactful in the organization. As part of that, they're trying the latest and greatest of everything, and they're subscribing to things. And what what's the best example of things of where people forget to unsubscribe? Corporate, right? I mean, I guess you could say government, but corporate is
Yeah.
probably, you know, they run audits, but it's like $20 here, $40 here, 60. It doesn't like they just don't notice, right? Like,
Yeah.
making billions a year, you don't notice. And so it is something they do try to clean up and audit. But my point is like, um, there's a ton of AI tourism that's funding this whole business. And I don't see that slowing down yet because until the until the rate of improvement with sort of LLMs and models and what they're capable of doing, um, you know, really starts slowing down, then I don't see companies still, slow down and trying the latest and greatest. And for companies, because you're dealing with like edge, right? Like 1% edge here, 1% faster growth here, like it's very scary to not be always using the best, right?
Yeah.
And so, this was like that sort of argument that even though the cost of inference goes down, and even though the cost of older models have become super, super cheap, companies are still spending more because they have to use the latest and greatest model because they feel like they need the latest and greatest edge. And of course, no group is spending more than engineering. Engineering is crushing these models, and and code is the simplest language in the world. Like, it's very difficult as a human to write code, sure, fine, but English is so nuanced. Like, you say something it can mean five different things, but code is Boolean. Like, either it
Yeah.
works or it doesn't work, right? And so for a machine, code is like much easier to understand than English. And then now take it a step further, we have billions of people with locked human creativity that is now getting unleashed because they can use LLMs to translate that creativity into some concept of something that they want to build.
I want to go back a little bit because I was thinking about, you said this, that the free version is probably not that much better, or even if it is, for the person using
Or
it
that much
to
worse.
sound,
Yeah.
or yeah, sorry, not that much worse. Or the new version isn't that much better, especially for the person that's trying to sound smarter to their friends. It really isn't. But I feel like there's always that, like, what makes the expensive version that much better? Because I had a friend, he was on the free version, he's fine, and he was like, "Oh, I just signed up for the free month of ChatGPT," and I followed up with him a few months after that, and I was like, "Hey, like, are you still using?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm still on premium, ChatGPT Pro, still using it." I was like, "For what?" He's like, "I don't know, I don't use Google anymore." And I'm like, you went from, I'm gonna try the free version, and you can't quantify how much better it is as a human being. We don't know the differences as much. Um, and on the corporate side of things, I do wonder, like, wouldn't there be a fear of, like, your personal, or not your personal, but your corporate data being, like, misused? Because you're saying that they're pushing these people to use it to try to get the
It's
edge, but at the end of the day, someone's going to put up a finance sheet into into
it's
ChatGPT and be like,
happening. It's happening.
and that's risky. It's pretty
So
risky.
I think as much as the different LM providers are pushing enterprise versions of their models or enterprise versions of their plans, that is, where they're guaranteeing some controls around the data and the privacy and whatnot, um, it's still happening. It might be happening rogue. It might be happening on your own devices. I mean, employees are doing this to do their job. And so the need is so great, right? Maybe they're not a good writer and they need to review an email. Maybe they're going into a critical meeting. They need to simulate a response. Maybe they have some spreadsheet. They don't have enough time to generate some sort of analysis, whatever. The need is so outweighing the fear that it's happening. And, I think there's a couple things here. So one, I think there's some blind trust that the LLMs themselves are getting so much volume. Are they really going through all this stuff, right? Like Google gets, I don't know what the number is, billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of searches a day. People upload all kinds of confidential stuff into Google search. Like people might
Hmm.
paste entire like emails that they want to translate, for example, into a different
Hmm.
language into Google search. All that data is being stored or collected in some way, right? Um, are they actually looking at all those things? Like, there's a little bit of this sort of like lost in volume. Like, it's just
Hmm.
like there's so much volume. Like it's sort of like, okay, yes, it's captured, but it's like we're talking about, 100 megatons of trash, and you have to go find that random hard drive that has 10,000 Bitcoin, right? Like that dude is trying to do.
Yeah,
Like it's like
yeah.
luck, right? Like it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so like there's part of that. Two, there's also the transient nature of data. Like data is confidential, particularly the closer it is to real time. But when you plot it on a timeline, it just becomes less valuable over time. Like the data is 2 years
Mhm.
old, is probably not as useful as it was 2 months ago, right? And so there's that aspect to it too. I think the other thing that's happening in parallel and why there is a big push, open source models. This allows organizations to self-host, run their own models, secured container, whatever it is, right? Basically firewalled. And I think that's real, and I think we're seeing some incredible progress with open source models. I think China has been putting out some amazing stuff. I think the Middle East, Saudi has been putting out some amazing stuff. And so I think like these models like Quen or whatever it is, um, they're they're getting maybe they're not best of breed closed SOTA model, but they're like 6 months behind, right? Like, or three
Mhm.
months behind, right?
Mhm.
And that's pretty crazy. And there was this interesting, I remember walking to a Google office, like they don't probably have this anymore. This was like 15, 20 years ago. They had this room, or not this room, but they had this common area with this like screen, and it had this graph, and it was a graph of like Bing search and Google search. And I'm like, what is this showing? Because it was like there was a line ahead of the Bing line, And what he was trying to show was how many months ahead they were of Bing search. So if they stopped engineering today, in how many months could Bing catch up to Google, right? And
Wow.
the delta was 6 months, like basically implying that they simply can't stop. They have to
Mm.
keep investing, right? And there is something to be said there, right? Because the open source models might be 3 or 6 months behind. At a certain point, I don't need PhD plus plus level answers to everything, right? And
Mhm.
I'd say a good analogy that I often use here is chess. So when the first chess games were released, I could beat them. Like they weren't particularly great, right? Then there was like this period, I'm like, I have to use the best chess software, right? So you're going and you're playing with like, yeah, and I don't even know what the best is today, but there's been historically some amazing different choices here. Um, but after a certain while, I'm like, the one on my phone is good enough. Like I don't need to go and run that particular version. That's ELO 3800. Like this one on my phone, that's ELO 2800 is good enough. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, right? And so I do think some of that will happen in the LLM arena. And of course, it's the incentives of these large companies that want to own it all, right? If you just look at the sort of the hyperscalers and FANG and big tech, right? They're now chasing $1 trillion outcomes. They're no longer chasing $1 billion outcomes. With LLMs, they can go 10x faster, 10x more. Um, they're going to give all this stuff for free, right?
Yeah.
Because in the end, they want to own everything, own all your data, own all the users. They don't want a billion MAU is not impressive anymore. Like I need 7 billion DAU. Like I need the entire world's population, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where things are going. And so just everything's at a whole nother level of scale, and it's hard to comprehend.
I think that's one thing of that AI has done. It made these numbers so much bigger, so much faster, and it's like sometimes if we sit down and think about it, because we say these numbers and we're like, okay, but it's like it's kind of ridiculous. We're at this point right now. It's like where are we going? Where could we go? Like everyone has to have two accounts of everything to like double the numbers. But I do want to talk about Gen AI upskilling because you were talking about. I think you called it the super IC. Is that what you
Yes.
called it? So when it comes to, in my mind, once the quote unquote super IC emerges, that's gonna be at the cost of several regular ICs, right? Like that's where we're headed, which is fine because that's what happened with the like let's say like assembly line. Like you had 10 people doing one thing, now you have a machine and one person controlling it to build these cars or whatever it may be. So I feel like that's where the IC role is headed. Is that what
I'm
you're?
not in that bucket. So I'm kind of in the bucket that so first of all, the super IC is almost more of an archetype in some ways. It's a mindset. You have to reframe your thinking. It's a mindset where your goal is to effectively replace yourself. So you're thinking a lot about how can I use Gen AI to accelerate and replace all my low leverage work so I can focus on high leverage things. But AI is not replacing taste. It's not necessarily replacing product sensibility. Will it get there? I don't know. Right? It's not replacing a point of view. It's not replacing um, a thesis or a conviction around something, right? By very definition, it's very neutral in its response. It's not likely to give strong recommendations. It'll likely play both sides, right? It's not likely to have a perspective that would yield a super unique outcome. It's based on historical, right? Whatever. It's incredible as an idea generator, challenge your thinking, push you forward, but you still need original thought. You still need taste. And so I think of super ICs as, now that we have democratized fractional expertise through an LLM, as you can now do more, right? And no surprise here, like, whether it's the product manager who can now do data science, whether it's the engineer who can now do automated unit tests without needing the QA engineering team, whether it's the designer who can do accessibility reviews, but the fractional experts still exist, and the companies now want to do 10x more. So they have individuals on their team that are doing 10x more. That doesn't mean the companies want to do the same amount of work. No, they want to do 10x more too. They want to do 100x more. So I actually am not in the bucket that it's replacing work. I do think, or replacing people. I think we're going to be hiring more. Actually, I think if you look at just sort of job posting data from LinkedIn, I think some of that is true. It's just become a more competitive job market because historically people were evaluated on years of experience, and that's not the greatest signal anymore. It's much more about, Gen AI is sort of such an upskiller that years of experience is not necessarily a tell. right? And even where you've worked does not necessarily tell, because we're looking for archetypes, we're looking for mindset, ways of thinking, ways of work, right? And so I think this more competitive job market has resulted in more louder voices shining through, which sort of make it feel like that. But I think if you look at raw job postings, I don't think it's been like in precipitous decline. I actually think it's still going up. Maybe within engineering, it might have declined a bit. But of course, COVID was so high. Really, what we did was we just bounced back to the median curve,
Exactly.
right? And so there's a little bit of sort of a reaction to that, right? Because there was sort of an overhiring period during ZERP. Um, uh, what I do think is if you don't upskill, uh, I would be concerned. I would be concerned that you're not likely to be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by a person who uses Gen AI in their workflow, right? That is something I do think you should think about. And that's mostly just because they're just simply more productive. They're getting more work done or they're asking better questions. Um, but I'm not in that, I'm not in that sort of camp. And I would say companies, they're, or I guess I'd say the other thing I'd sort of call out is as part of this sort of new archetype, historically larger companies hire specialists. So if you take like a product manager role, you can often break it down into a few things like product sense, um, you know, creative execution, right? Because so much of strategy in my way, in my opinion, is just a form of like coming up with a creative way to execute, right? And then domain knowledge, right? Like how much you know about the space. And uh, if you uh, if you look at how historically companies would hire, the easiest way to sort of screen a bunch of resumes was look at domain knowledge because we're implicitly kind of lazy and there's hundreds of resumes, and so we don't necessarily lean into like, oh, does this person have great product taste, does this person have like incredible go to market chops or really creative ideas on growth or whatever it might be. We all of a sudden look at just simply domain knowledge. They've been in this domain for a long time, and so we give it an overweight because it's the easiest form of screening when it comes to like sort of quickly screening a resume. And so we would hire effectively what you would call specialists, right? People have been doing the same thing for many, many years. And in a Gen AI world, it's not clear that's the best place to play. You want to play more generalist, which interestingly is a lot more where a lot of startup-y type people have been playing. Because in startups, you're often doing much more generalist work. You're not an expert necessarily on anything, but you can do like 80, 90% of everything. And you get your hands dirty and then you can lean on experts when you need to, or you can lean on Gen AI, right? And so I think this transformation is happening, but I don't think the interview process has yet completed that transformation. I think it's happening slowly, but I think large companies are still leaning into traditional interview process while also recognizing that there's this Gen AI thing happening, but it will happen over the next some years. And actually, if you look at like the hottest startups, like I think they're very much shifting into this sort of archetype style hiring.
Oh, startups definitely are. I think what's happening is, and what's going to happen is, like with the bigger companies, some of the middle to senior management is like, well, I don't want to learn a bunch of shit yet, so I'm going to make sure that we're in this older form of hiring, and slow down this like overarching change that's coming up, and that's why a lot of these
So
larger teams aren't shifting.
yeah, my opinion here is changing behavior is really hard. So if
Mhm.
you had um if you've been taking notes a certain way, to go and then say, hey, you don't need to take notes that way anymore. You can use another app that can capture the meeting and it can generate the notes for you, and then you can add some context, whatever. It's a new workflow. It's like really hard, right? Like it's like I've been doing something a certain way. Like in sales teams historically, there was this notion that the VP of sales could tell people what your workflow should do, but different SDRs and AEs on those teams, they might choose their own workflow. And if they're hitting their quota, VP of sales, like, not my job to tell them how to do their job. I mean, they're hitting their
Yeah.
quotas. I'm going to let them do whatever they're doing. Right. And so changing workflow is really hard. And in some ways, tech and people who've worked in tech are the most comfortable with being uncomfortable because in our world, we've had to change more than in other sorts of sectors, right? Like just because tech disrupts itself on a regular basis. Um, but as you expand that out and you think about like, okay, bigger companies, and then you like broader sectors like healthcare and legal, like they've had workflows in how they do their paralegal research and how they prepare their briefs and how they follow up the same way for like 10, 20, 30 years. And now they have to radically change that flow. And I think that's the challenge here. And so when you think of senior leadership or executives in a lot of companies, they don't really want to change their workflow too much. But then at
Yeah.
the same time, they want to mandate it across their company. So I think there's a little bit of fear there too, right? Because they have anxiety themselves. Like, are they becoming disintermediated? Right. And then at the same time, like, I don't think, and I actually call this the super org, which is like, I gave a talk on Reforge recently about this, which is a different, like, which is basically how do you build a team of super ICs?
Hmm.
Is leadership themselves are becoming ICs, right? It's not happened in biggest companies, right? But like they are in some ways because of Gen AI have to be able to get their hands dirty. They have to be able to like do super IC level work. It's like spanning top to bottom where, and so this sort of transformation and what this new sort of organizational design looks like, I think there's a lot of questions here, right? Like, and I have a lot more thoughts on that topic, but like, I think there's a lot of questions like how this is all going to play out and we'll see. But I think the experiments, the A/B tests are happening now.
I think it's really similar to when like agile development came up, like the agile workflow, where it's like, oh, we're gonna go from waterfall to this like releasing every sprint, and the teams are smaller, and people are doing each other's jobs. And like there's I think there's still not most people know it's good, but a lot of people still are like, no, we want to keep it waterfall. We want to release twice a year as opposed to all the time. And it's a similar fear, right? It's a
I
similar
think,
feel of it.
yeah, I mean, test-driven development, agile, whatever, like Scrum, I mean,
Scrum.
those things, sure, fine. I mean, I think those were disruptive in some ways, and at certain points, people realize like, oh, we have to adopt this because this is the new breed or best way of work, and we're seeing better outcomes and whatnot. And in some ways, you could argue there was a lot of experimentation related to this with remote work during COVID, post-COVID, right? So you had like fully remote, we had fully in office, and we had hybrid, and people are figuring out now, learning. It's taken 4 or 5 years. Like, okay, what's working for my company culture? What model works best to drive innovation? And so one of the call outs I saw was that being remote is great if you have the strategy kind of figured out. You're just pure in execution mode. But being remote is terrible if you're like under threat. You're not, things are going sideways and you need to like innovate faster. We need everyone in the office, right? Like, because alignment takes a lot of energy when you're fully remote, and the constant ideation is just more difficult when you're fully remote. And so it's interesting, they're getting those data points now. And so in some ways, COVID and just the way people were working was a massive A/B test. The same thing's now happening at some level with Gen AI. And we're going to get data, over the next few years. I mean, just 2 years ago, there was large swaths of the workforce that was, I would argue, AI denialism. There was sort of like, oh, this is not really an accelerant, and this is not going to make things go faster, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's really hard pressed to argue that Gen AI is not massively accelerating work in some shape or form. And so, you hear less of that. And so we are collecting the data, we're learning as we go along, but this is part of the sort of dramatic shift that'll happen. And I do think, I think executives, like some employees, they have anxiety. They have anxiety themselves, right? Like one of the things people don't often realize, once people accumulate any form of wealth, I'm speaking from the perspective of like, I've had a few exits and whatnot. And I financial freedom, right? But like once people accumulate any sort of wealth or whatnot, like their whole stress model is how to preserve it, right? Now they're an executive of a company, like how do I preserve this role, right? Like, there's as much as you want to say. Here's a good example, just food for thought. Historically, if offered the opportunity in a company to hire more people, you would say yes, because optically, more people means more power, more control, more leadership, more compensation, right? Like, because that's how things were graded. Like, oh, I manage more people, I can become more senior, right? But like, if you take like a startup or new products organization, the best decisions, and this is speaking from someone who's my whole career has been startups, mostly acquisitions in companies. The best decisions are when you have less resources, because you have to make a choice, right? This is scarcity versus abundance. And so how many times would you see an executive go and tell leadership, no, I don't need more resources, or I don't need more budget? That would be thinking about what's best for the business versus
Yeah.
what's best for them, right? And so you can see how incentives clash. And it's something you have to think about. And this is why it's really important in anything you're doing or any work that you're doing, that you have to simulate, what's their incentive structures and how are they thinking about them?
And So, and I want to jump into, because you mentioned your exit. So I want to jump into your story, because your path is very unconventional. It's very cool, and I want to get into it. Right before I do that, so with all these, if you were to not generalize, but like with the upskilling within Gen AI for all the different people who are ICs who haven't upskilled yet into anything, haven't dabbled too much, are there any general skills one should pick up, or thought processes that one should adopt to become a super IC?
I think the first step is, I think it's very simple. I think the first step is you have to ask yourself a question. Have you been right about everything in your life? And if you actually have been right about everything in your life, I don't have anything further to say. Like, you've crushed it. You've crushed life. But I would imagine five nines, 99.99% of people will say no, right? And if you accept that, then the next question, so does that mean it's possible you can learn something new, right? Like, I'm just using logic, right? And if you accept that, so then the question is, like, then what is preventing you to try to see if this can be something that, can materially impact your life? And so I like to kind of start there, and I have a little slide where I kind of show this series of questions, and I call it like get humble, right? Humility, right? Then I think the next step is like, okay, fine, I'm going to go try this stuff out. How do I start? That's the most common sort of thing. There's so many different tools or whatever. So what I often tell people is you don't need state of the art here, right? Go use whatever you want. You want to use Google Gemini, it's free, go use that. You want to use ChatGPT, it's free. You want to use Claude, I don't care. Like, just choose one thing and ignore the rest. Like, just go use whatever you want, because you don't need state of the art. 95% is good enough for 99.999% of things that you need to do, right? And so just go choose one thing. Then the next question is like, okay, what do I use it for? And this is where there's two parts. Part one, go identify people in your role, peers at your company, other companies. Usually, people who do similar work to you if you've been working in the space for some time, right? You've been an accountant, other accountants. You've been an engineer, other engineers. They're probably more likely to have already tried all this stuff, but like, whatever role. If you've been legal, other legal. And ask them, how are they using it? Because so much of the learning is seeing how other people use it. So create a peer group. And in that peer group, when they show how they're using it, showing is not good enough. So while they're showing it, ask them what tool exactly you at the same time install that tool, and you do it with them, because you have to do it yourself. There's so much tribal knowledge when it comes to using these tools that just seeing it is not good enough, because there's some weird learnings with watching Replit agent start spinning in circles when it's not following your instructions, or watching how you continue to prompt ChatGPT to get it to answer what you want, right? So you have to kind of do it yourself, right? You have to go through the pain, right? It's like learning how to drive from watching YouTube videos versus learning how to drive when you actually drive. You actually have to do it. There's just no way around it, right? Right. So ask your peer group, and with that peer group, say, hey, would you be willing to set up once a month, like 4 of us maybe get together and just kind of show how we're using it? It would be really helpful to me, right? And this is your sort of first opportunity to kind of learn. The second thing I tell people to do is write out what you're doing in your day in 10-minute blocks. It sounds crazy, but just try it. Write out what you're doing. Like, this is what I did the last 10 minutes. This is what I'm doing now, current 10 minutes, and just do it the whole day. Take that sheet and first ask yourself, so your own model in your own brain, is there anything in here I could have done faster with Gen AI? And then 2, take that sheet and send it to Gen AI and ask, say, hey, I documented what I did today. How can you help me with any of these things? And see what it comes up with. And you're going to discover workflows and use cases, because so much of this is discovery, that are going to blow your mind. And you're like, whoa, I didn't need to spend time there. I could have used Gen AI and massively skipped that part, or massively improved the time I spent there, or whatever it could be, like organizing columns in Excel. I mean, who knows, right? And so I think these are like 2 good starting patterns to sort of get you to reframe your thinking, and move you into that sort of super IC.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're both great, because for me at least, the second one I haven't done, but I feel like it's amazing. If you're ever in a block in terms of like what you're doing, and you're like, this isn't going well and I'm not using AI to do it, tell it what you're doing and ask it how it can help to do it. I mean, I can't believe it. I haven't thought of that before. But the other one of creating a group, that's great. at least from my perspective, is when I was starting out with Gen AI, I was speaking to a few friends, and they would give me prompts,
Yep.
and that I like had no clue even the point of it. But it's like, yeah, like write down XYZ about what you're trying to get done, and then put this prompt in, and then just see what, and it would come up, and I'd be like, this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's just the first time you get a prompt from outside, I think your life changes a little bit, and then you realize that you can ask ChatGPT to make prompts for you, and that'll make everything
Correct.
better as well.
No, I
Uh,
think the whole, I think again, it's mostly about discovery and then trying. I mean, and that's the key here. I think you have to, um, watching YouTube videos is not enough. And not everybody is like on Twitter and knowing all the cutting edge and all that kind of stuff, right? So like you have to, that's why the peer group is most helpful. I think when it comes to that peer group, it's better if you can find peers that are in the same functional kind of role, right? So it's less helpful hearing how engineering is using Gen AI when I work in design. It doesn't mean I might not discover things, but seeing how other designers are using Gen AI when I work in design is a lot more
Yeah. No, for sure. But yeah, so let's jump in. Can you? So I wanna find out about your first startup, which is you said it was I think in the ringtone space. But before we do that, tell us about before starting startup. So like getting into college, right after college. Like, were you like, this is what I want to do when I grow up? Like, I want to be in tech, or I want to, build companies and sell them, which is
helpful.
like I think the dream for everyone right now.
You
But what
know,
was that?
yeah, I've been
And then
asked
we'll
this
get into it.
before. I think so I was always into computers. Like I was taking apart my 286 in like I don't remember 1992, whatever Apple IIe early, you know, taking apart, reassemble, playing with stuff. Like I just simply enjoyed it in a weird way. I don't know why, but I really enjoyed it. Ended up first job was Subway, but second job in high school was at CompUSA, which was a big box retailer that's no longer in existence. But they used to sell desktop software, etc., fixing computers, right? And then later at Fry's Electronics, which is like one of the more famous big box retailers selling computers and electronics and TVs and all that stuff. Also no longer in business. Also fixing computers, right? Before I went into college. Just really sort of kind of started there. Started my first little side hustle business as people were going into college. Um, Dorm rooms for the first time had Ethernet ports, when most people's computers didn't have Ethernet cards. And so I would go to different college kids and say, "Hey, I'll install your card, and I'll bring the card, install it, get your computer configured," because they had to deal with Windows drivers and all that kind of crazy stuff back then.
Yeah.
For like $75, and like I probably made like thousands of dollars doing that as a senior, as a little side hustle. It only take me like 30 minutes to an hour of computer. So it's kind of neat where I got started. But while I was in college, the dot-com boom was happening, and I could see this happening around me, but I didn't know what it meant, right? Like I wasn't like my parents were not really in tech. I mean, they worked in tech. My dad's a mathematician. He kind of stopped working in tech in like 95, 96, and then became a teacher and then a professor, just teaching math. So I didn't really have that kind of exposure, like what that meant and whatnot. And so um, I'm in college. I'm seeing this dot-com boom. Didn't really know what it meant. Like, wow, this is so crazy, right? Like all this stuff, right? And then I read an article about somebody from my high school who was like a year above me, a year older than me, like started a company, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like I could
Yeah.
do that. Like why I can't do that, right? And so like part of it is just kind of growing up in a environment where I was never like I was like probably a top 20% kid, like not top 10%, not top 5. There's always smarter people, right? And I'm like, it's like a little chip on your shoulder, immigrant household, like whatever, can you do better? So I'm like, it's like kind of proving it to myself. Can I start something? Can I do it on myself? And I enjoyed it, right? And so I got some of the smartest kids in the computer science department at Cal Poly where I went to school. And we would start brainstorming ideas every weekend. We came up with a few ideas, and we ended up starting a meta file sharing network that was called Terrazima at the time, and it was the first of its kind. I think we invented the word leecher, which was like to take but not share. There's a whole long story around all of that, but it was, it's kind of where it started, and through that, met some incredible people. We won the local business plan. You have to hustle. I mean, there was no accelerators or incubators. The internet was relatively nascent. I mean, you just didn't have resources. You had to figure things out. I remember asking somebody like, how do you incorporate and set this stuff up? And they're like, oh, go to the Chamber of Commerce and buy this book, right? Like, that's what people would do back then, right? So it was different.
Yeah.
So I think, some very interesting stuff sort of learned. Now, fast forward, it didn't stop. I then went on, like, that ultimately didn't pan out. The recording industry was like suing all the file sharing networks, and really just didn't honestly really just didn't have the network or knew how to kind of grow it. Like, we were scared to launch it because we thought we were going to get sued. Also didn't have the budget to just simply fund the hosting of the thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was so weird. Like, it wouldn't be a lot of money, but like even the installer was $200. I'm like, oh, I don't want to pay $200. But like, we had some little, it was a great sort of thing that was built, got a little bit of press, whatever, within the open source community. Later started a dating site, and that was before I started my ringtone company, and I think it was just like this urge, desire to just kind of keep building things. Like, I liked building things on the side. I enjoyed it. And then the funny thing is, somewhere along the lines, and I'm not going to go through like every arc because there's so many different arcs here, and I have a whole link tree with my product portfolio of all the things I've built in my career. But somewhere along the line, it just it started becoming easier to build something from scratch than to join something. It's all I knew how to do, right? And then weirdly, I fell for my own trap. It started becoming what people, I sort of felt like it was what people expected me to do, which is almost a real trap, because now, once you have some success, people are following you and watching and what you're working on next, and people are expecting me to start another company. And in some ways, well, what if I don't want to do that again? Because it's a grind, right? Each time I go
Yeah.
through it, it's like a health arc, it's family pressure, stress arc, it's like multiple layers, right? And so, like, uh, um, uh, it's just interesting looking at how that sort of journey started.
So tell me, like, so let's just, for example, like your first exit. After that, was it kind of like, because you said after a point it becomes that it's easier to start something than join a company. So after your first exit, was it like a lull and like, let me see what I'm over here counting my millions. I'm gonna hang out, not really worry about anything, and then try to start something new right away, or what's that time right after exiting? What's the thought process there?
You
This is
know,
just from
um,
my understanding.
I've had a few different exits here, but let's say like first material exit. I think the so I say post acquisition, there's four emotions that people go through. And so usually you don't just exit, right? Like, you exit and now you're working at your parent company for some amount of time. Uh, um, but there are four emotions. There's sort of like, I call it relief, like the first day, which is like basically like, because the closing process is so stressful and all the stuff you
Sure.
go through. I mean, it's just insane. Um, and then within a matter of days, it's not uncommon you enter regret, which is, oh, why did I sell it? I could have made this bigger. What was I thinking? Blah blah blah. And that's
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, look at Figma, right? They didn't sell it, and now they're doing great
Yeah.
as a public company, even better. Um, then you go through what I like to call like uh, inspired, or enthused, which is basically like, okay, I I'm going to make this the best acquisition they ever did. We're going to crush it. They're going to look at this and be so successful. And then finally, you realize that the mothership, or the larger corporate, has all these guardrails, right? Like, there's administrative process, there's legal process,
Yeah.
all these things you can't do that made you successful as a startup. And it just beats you down, right? And then or maybe they even decide to rebrand your product or shut it down or change it in ways that you would not expect. And then you enter this sort of last phase, which is like, I don't like to use the word apathy, but it's kind of like, it's like, it's like you acceptance, it's sort of like, I went through all this, and like, okay, you know what, it's not really my company anymore. It's not my product. They own it. They can do whatever they want. I'm going to do my work while I'm here, but like, it's a mental shift. Right. And I think it's interesting because these four emotions, I think every founder goes through post an acquisition. Like, I've, whether they admit it or not, I've talked to enough people behind closed doors to confirm that what this is. And I probably should turn it into an acronym and publish it out, because it's like, it's so commonly asked. Um,
Yeah.
but then usually, I've been very lucky. If I just look at like my last two exits, my second exit was when my daughter was 2. Got to spend a lot of time. I spent a lot of time with her. Mozilla's a fully remote company, which is great. I'm in working all the time too, but I spent a lot of time with her, which is awesome. When my previous company exited to Salesforce, after I left Salesforce, I basically took 3 years off. My son was only like 3 or 4, so I was spending tons of time with him. right? They're 7 years apart. So it's been amazing just to be able to spend the time with the kids. I mean, I think from that perspective, that's been very rewarding.
The- Um, yeah. Well, so when you so okay, so you don't have to go into detail. So I'm assuming you're going through one of those four right now, right? Not
So
to put you on the spot,
it
but
is,
like I
yeah.
kind
So
of
it's interesting. At Mozilla, product was effectively shut down day one, right? They wanted to bring our AI talent. This is pre-ChatGPT era, to
okay.
do article summarization for the Pocket product, which is also now shut down, right? Because we were doing meeting summarization stuff. So I went through some very accelerated emotions, right? The cycles of these emotions. But I'm in a new role now at Mozilla, and I think that's given me new enthusiasm. So basically, what ultimately happened is I got moved into, and I'm a big believer in this sort of like lean into your strengths. Uh, you know, uh, find your strengths and double down, triple down. So we have a new products group at Mozilla, and I lead all the new small business products, which is like solo and whatnot. And so I'm having a lot of fun because this is kind of playing into my strengths, which is like building 0 to 1, building from scratch, narrowing an idea, defining, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm in a great space right now.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like you're getting to be like an entrepreneur, right? Like you're able to like build
Well,
completely new concepts internally.
yeah, and I've written a little bit about it and I've talked about it publicly. I mean, it's very interesting just even thinking through the challenges of building 0 to 1 in a larger company versus a startup. There's all sorts of different sort of guardrails and whatnot, right? That make things more difficult. It's a whole conversation in itself. Um, but that compare and contrast, very sort of interesting.
And so I mean, since I mean, obviously, like we just said, built so many different consumer facing things. You're still doing that right now. When you're evaluating a new product idea, like what's your framework for doing that? What makes you think like this is a good idea? But even because I know eventually, like the whole thing is everyone's like, you got to test it. You have to go out there and see if people actually want it. But before that, when you're coming up with
Yeah,
ideas,
I don't believe there's any green space. Like I think everything's red ocean. Like every idea, there's no such thing as a unique idea. So I lean a lot more into what you would call like founder idea fit or founder passion fit or founder product fit. Is there something you're particularly passionate about? Like, is there a category? Then I often tell people just start swimming in that category. Literally build anything. Like, for whatever reason, you're really familiar, really passionate about like um, Wolfram Alpha and like solving hard math problems and you want to build something there. I'm like, okay, go start designing and building a better calculator. Whatever. Just build anything. As you start swimming in that direction, you're going to uncover and unlock all sorts of things. And this is where you're banking that your product instinct will steer you into something because nobody starts at point A and ends at point A, right? I call this jello in motion. Like it takes shape, it hardens over time as you kind of fly through. Little bits fall off, et cetera, et cetera. So you you will have to, as you go through this, you lean on the fact that your product instinct will steer you. Like you're going to talk to different people as you're building this. Like, oh, there's something interesting there. Oh, there's an opportunity here. It's going to look vastly different, but it's in generally the same space. But if you don't start, you never sort of even get there. Now, I have a strong bias for personal pain points, right? Which is almost counter to a lot of the standard, idea sort of doctrine, which I frankly disagree with. Like I think you should lean into personal pain points, and the reason is when you experience the pain yourself, like you're let's say using Salesforce in a company and you just experience this pain, you have domain knowledge, like you know exactly what you hate about it and what you want to fix and why you think you can make it better. Now, I think there is a talent for sort of seeing problems. Some people look at a door and it says it's a door, and some people look at a door and they're like, why is the knob designed like that? Right? Like it bothers them, right? Some people look at a door and they're like, I wonder how much that cost in materials to make, right? Because they think about it from a finance perspective. Some people look at a door and they're like, I wonder how they market that. Like, do they call it like blah blah blah, right? People are wired differently, right? And you have to kind of change your thinking to think about how you're wired. I look at things and I'm always looking at design. It bothers me when I see things like, why is it designed like that? Why does it say that? Right. And so it's always been, let's call it natural or easier for me to look at something and just see a problem. Like, oh, I need to fix that. And then I try to fix it for myself. And I'm a big believer if I can get 10 people, I can get 100 people, I get 100 people, I can get 1,000 people, et cetera, right? So just in the concentric circles of growth. Um, But I do have ranges of litmus tests that I look at, right? Like, for example, can I get users for this? Like, I think about virality. When you think about consumer, you have to think a lot about virality, loops, growth, whatever. Like, am I playing on a customer, like a vice? Does this product help make me famous? Does it make me rich? Does it help me meet my companion, right? Playing on sort of different vices. Um, can I build this, right? Like some products are dependent on some futuristic tech. It's not possible, or it has so many dependencies. Like I need to like have a supply chain in China and whatever, and this and that and hardware and whatnot. And I can't do it, right? Like, do I know how to build this, or can I build this, or do I think it's within my wheelhouse? Like, and it doesn't mean you can't do it. Like, people come up, people want to build a space rocket, sure, like you can, but like, it's something I do think about, right? Like, can I get users? Can I build this? Um, do I think that this is something that the biggest tech companies do not have as a top 10 priority? I'm sort of the believe that, or camp that if big tech thinks that it's a top 10 priority for them, it's very difficult to compete. It's one thing if you're already in market, they can actually provide juice for you because they're helping educate the market. But if you're starting in a nascent space and they made it their priority, like it's hard, right? Usually you want to find openings or insertion points where it's on their list, but it's like in the top 100, right? It's not their top 10 things, right? Doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just ways to think about evaluating risk and sort of narrowing ideas. I mean, these are just some of the examples of things I think about. But what I will say is there's no there's no right or wrong here. So I learned very quickly years ago that I used to say, like, I don't think that's a good idea, or that sounds kind of crazy or whatever. And then you just see it take off, right? Like, so I have no trust in my own judgment or sensibility of what works or what doesn't work anymore. Right. And so I'm sort of like, everything's possible. So I have to come in with a very open mind. In the end, when you look at it specifically in the context of Mozilla, like, yeah, we have to align against other sort of guardrails. Like, do we have the resources to build this? Do we know how to build this? Can we build this in a certain amount of time? When you're in a larger company, it's harder to do sometimes longer term thinking, right? You're looking at 6-month windows. They want earlier metrics that yield certain kinds of ideas, certain kinds of products that you build, right? So I think there's different kinds of guardrails, of course, when you're building within a company versus a startup. But these are just examples of things that I might look at and consider. But I will say it's not one size fits all, and there's no like steadfast rule. If there was, then I'd be the best investor in the world.
Yeah, no, I think it's the funny thing is with all these like crazy ideas is that in the last I would say like 5-ish years we've seen so many crazy ideas take off where like it shouldn't work but it does, or people are just excited about it so it takes off. But I do also want to say, you're saying that if it's not in a company's top 10 list but it's in their top 100 list, it's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, because if you build it someone might end up acquiring you, which is I feel like is a part of what like your thought process is going into these businesses that you've sold, because it's like they're not putting money into it so they don't feel like it's a loss for them to acquire another company, but it's still something that they're interested in. Is that kind of where that
I personally think you shouldn't design to get acquired. The chance of getting acquired is extremely low. To meet even somebody who's been through more than one acquisition, first of all, to meet somebody who's been through an acquisition in itself is extremely rare, like a public company acquisition. To meet somebody who's been through more than one is even more rare. The chance of getting acquired is so low. Like it's like the volume of companies that raise money versus the volume of companies that get acquired, it's like 1 to 100,000, right? Like there's like team landing, soft landings and acquihires here and there, but acquisitions are extremely rare. And so you have to, and it constrains your thinking because now you start designing for a certain outcome. You have to be thinking like, can I make this a real business, right? Can I get to third base? Can I get to home run? Can I take this to a public company? Like you can't be thinking like, oh, can I get acquired? So I think that's very, very sort of important. Now, what happens in that journey is a whole different conversation. And there are strategies like how to drive buyers and whatnot. It's all, they say it's sort of better to be bought than sold, right? There's like a whole process there, but like I think that's like kind of a different conversation. But like I think I don't think you should plan for that kind of outcome.
Yeah. All right. And okay, so you mentioned way in the beginning about other products that Solo's working on, thinking about for, to help these solopreneurs build their businesses. Can you give us a few sneak peeks?
Yeah. So, I ran this very simple survey like 2 years ago or just starting Solo, basically saying like, here's here's like 100 different use cases that we kind of spit out through ChatGPT and some other research, like rank which of these things can be most helpful to you. And, it's funny. It's like all the things you would expect. It's like, can you help me with ads? Can you help me with business cards? Can you help me with my social media? Can you help me with my call center? Can you help me with, my blog? Can you help me with, whatever it is, business email? Like it's just like ranges and ranges of things, business phone number, like all these back office things, accounting, taxes, etc. Right. So we took that list, we ranked it, and we're going after all of them systematically. Right. So we have products that we're building to help small business with their social media. We have stuff that we're building for blogs to help them with small business blogs. We have a voice bot we're building. So it's like your virtual receptionist. We have an accounting product we're building, which is like back office. I'm basically trying to build a whole suite for small business because in the end, I want the small business owner to focus on their business. Like they shouldn't have to focus on all this other stuff. And if you look at what Shopify has done for e-commerce buyers, I'm trying to do that for service providers.
That's incredible. That's like, I'm honestly, I'm because for myself, even, I'm just like, that makes life so much easier because today's running a business, you have to do, there's so much extra stuff, like you mentioned, right? Like you have to have an Instagram, you have to blog post, and not that you have to, right? Like very many businesses you don't have to, but a lot of people either feel like they have to, so they're gonna do it. Whether or not they have to is not the question. They're gonna do it, or they want to, right? Like who doesn't want a blog? Not saying don't expect to make money from a blog, but some people just really want to be able to do that as a part of their business so that they can have a blog, something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah. And, and a lot of people think of blog for growth, but blog is actually for re-engagement, right? It's really about building a mailing list and sending your existing audience. When you start looking at things like social media, uh, social media, uh, the real trick there is can you go viral? But for a lot of small business, it's really about re-engagement. So you have an existing audience that's already following you, and can you get them to come back as a customer?
It's the same as a website, right? It's you're not gonna have people come to you because of the blog. You have to give the blog to get them to get back in
Correct.
the swing of things.
100%.
And I think that's gonna be one of the biggest things that comes out of this for people because most people honestly that do this don't understand that when it comes to all these different things. But I'm very excited about these projects because I'm definitely I feel like I'm gonna be on solo quite a bit. So can you tell me now when it Mozilla is a unique mission-driven organization, right? How have they influenced what you're building right now? Or how have they influenced what you were getting into post-acquisition
I missed the
when you were
first part
working
of the
with them?
question. How have they been
Yeah, so
naming Mozilla?
Mozilla, yeah. So Mozilla is like they're
Yeah.
they're in a unique position. They're mission-driven. They've
Absolutely.
been around for a long time. How does that influence the way you decide to build? Because obviously, since your background, you're coming into this existing organization, how have they influenced you?
Mozilla has always been this kind of like, the arbiter of the internet, right? We're here to do good. We're not big tech. We're not selling your data, all that sort of stuff, right? And like, I think it's been an incredible position because Firefox has been so mission driven for so many years and it's impacted so many people. Um, but the browser has lost market share like over time. I think it's hovering probably 5, 6, 4, 5, 6%. I'm not sure exactly, right? And so that has always been our primary sort of revenue stream business model, but we need to diversify. And so there's a big focus at Mozilla, like what are new products that we can build for new markets? And we're doing multiple things there. It's not just small business tools, but we're looking at other things too. Like can we bring, uh, you know, uh, Firefox for work or, whatever it might be, or like we have a product called Odin, which is in the cybersecurity category, right? Which is around like outsourced red teaming for LLMs, etc.
Wow.
So I think there's multiple things that we can do there. I think when you think about Solo specifically, when after they acquired the company and then they ultimately what happened was they were integrating the tech to do article summarization in Pocket. ChatGPT got released like 3 or 4 months later, and they're like, "Whoa, this is actually better. We should use that." I'm like, "Yeah, we should use that." Right? Like my kind of role kind of moved in like new products,
Yeah.
and I started thinking about like, what should I build if I'm working at Mozilla? And I think about Mozilla as internet, web, right? Like, what is the future of the web? And I was thinking about Gen AI, and I wanted to intersect those two things. And so I was looking at that, and I was looking at small business, and so I felt that was very mission aligned. Like, here's Mozilla helping with helping small business owners become rich entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and helping them grow their business. And in some ways, it feels like we're democratizing access by giving them those tools. And we're using Gen AI, so we're swimming downstream. We're not swimming upstream. Like we're leveraging tech to make this sort of a much and substantially better experience. So I think that's kind of how we landed, and it's been incredibly supportive in that way. I mean, a great outcome for me, or just sort of for Mozilla itself, is if we can translate all these different products that we're building for SMBs to enable lots and lots of new solopreneurs, and then also for it to become a new business for Mozilla to continue to try to diversify revenue for Fire.
That's epic, and I'm genuinely excited because all the things that I'm thinking about that I'm gonna have to build, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have to worry about it. I won't have to worry about it as much. All right, cool. So this was amazing. So the way that I like to pre-wrap up is I do what I call the FAQs. The joke is they're called frequently asked questions, but they're not frequent because I do different ones for different people.
Okay.
So I want to. Can you tell me from all the different exits that you've had, what is like one of the biggest learning moments from the different ones? Like, what's something that happened in one of them that you're like, okay, I know this for the rest of my life for this particular situation. Is there anything like that, or anything that other new founders or people that are exiting for the first time should look out for?
I think this didn't really apply to me, but it's something I hear a lot. If you're in a situation where you have 6 months of cash left, the natural tendency for a lot of first-time founders is to kind of wait till they're like at month 1, like 1 month left, to then like, oh, I need to go find a buyer. That's not going to happen. The process of playing out a downside scenario where you have to find a buyer, so be sold, not bought, like where you're doing the outreach, actually starts on day 1. Right? You need to think about right after you raise your first funding, like who you think are the 10 most likely buyers of your company, and then go and start spending the time to try to meet the stakeholder who can actually do that buy. Right? Usually it's somebody very senior because they have to authorize some larger budget, because it's going to take you time, and then meet them once a year and just share like what you're working on. And yes, you're giving them competitive intel and whatnot, and you have to build that relationship. It's not easy and it's hard. It takes time, but the real trick is, in a downside scenario, usually the way acquisitions work is there's some kind of offsite, right? They're like having an executive team offsite or something of that nature. And then somebody said, there's some determination that like, hey, we need to enter this space. And like, we need to be in that space tomorrow. Like not, like right away, right? And when that happens, you want to be top of mind, right? Because what they're going to do is they're going to go and start corp devs like, hey, who do we know in this space? Can you go find somebody, right? And if you're not top of mind, then you might get missed, right? Because the real miss here is not getting purchased. The real miss here is if they didn't contact your company and they purchased a competitor. Because almost always when they're looking at a competitor, they're talking to others too. So you kind of want to be on the radar. And so the real trick here is you have to build that relationship early from the beginning. And that's your downside scenario, right? Because you're not leaning on that. You're leaning on like you're going to play it out and get bought, not sold, right? But in a downside situation. And then of course, you have to then think about and starting that process much earlier. You can't align these ducks like with 1 month left of runway, right? So this is sort of a general learning for people thinking about, and I'm happy to talk about more about this offline, but a general learning for people thinking about the M&A process and being in that situation, which is super common.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like with all the stuff that I saw in your profile and what's going on, I feel like there might need to be a second episode of this because there's so much more to go over. Okay, this is a fun one. And this is actually one that I made up without the help of any sort of Gen AI model, because this is something that I thought was funny. So Mozilla has a history of products being named after animals, right? They have Firefox, they have Thunderbird. So what would Solo's spirit animal be?
Oh man.
Right? You got to admit that's a good one. That's like, I was so proud of that question.
Well, I mean, I need to espouse our values, which is like simplicity, fast,
Okay.
simple,
I'm
beautiful,
going to help you with this.
and free. So I would probably take those 4 characteristics, put it in ChatGPT, and ask it to suggest spirit animals that align with that. I don't know what free means, but maybe freedom. Freedom makes me think bird.
I was going to say the same thing. I was like, you have to move Thunderbird over.
Beautiful bird. There's some very fast birds.
Yeah.
That maybe don't simple. I'm not sure what simple means. simple, maybe they're not predators, right? They're friendly. So I don't know, but
I,
that's
I so
that's the thought
actually,
process running through my head.
as you were like going through that, I was like, well, it's kind of also for me, it's like maybe an orca, but orcas are not peaceful. But I don't know. I just that's what came to mind. Anyways, all right.
It's a majestic animal. It's huge though.
Yeah,
It's
it's
huge.
it is
It's
quite
huge.
huge.
It's heavy. It's like, it makes me think of like a WordPress site, right? With all the code.
You're okay. All right, I got you. Uh, all right. We'll come back to it. You keep thinking of it for the next episode. Okay. Finish the sentence. Great products for small businesses always blank.
Great products for small business. Um, always, always one word.
It doesn't have to be. You can tweak it a little bit, but
Yeah, I mean, I think great products for small business always replace your low leverage work,
perfect.
right?
Perfect.
Which is really playing along the super IC.
Perfect. What is the best advice you've ever gotten, or your favorite quote?
You know, I've gotten so much great advice here. I'm going to share two. I used to have this poster in my room, the office, when we used to be in offices. Yeah. But it's something like try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, try, succeed or success. I don't remember the exact last word, right? It just kind of keeps repeating, and it really shows this sort of perseverance mindset that is involved in building startups from scratch. I mean, these things take time. I mean, we just saw yesterday, I saw Clay raised 100 million or dollar round or whatnot, right? But they had 6 years of zero revenue and it was a real grind for them, right? So they got there. It's amazing, right? In a similar fashion, another quote that comes to mind, I had an old board member. I remember I was sharing in like 2007, working on this, working on that, working on like all these cool things I'm building, multiple things. And I think he said something interesting. He goes, Raj, you only get rich once. And I was thinking, like, I didn't know what it meant. And it took me a while to figure out what he meant was focus. And it really changed. Actually, that one really changed my thinking, right? Because you can obviously do tons of things at the same time, but you only have to, in some ways, get lucky once, right? You only have to win once. Once at that point, as Zuck famously had said, he doesn't think he could have another better idea than Facebook, and that's why he didn't want to sell it, right? Like it might be his last best idea, because the reality is, it's super hard to get in those positions, right? Like repeat entrepreneurs, it's very rare you see repeat unicorn entrepreneurs. I mean, you do in SaaS, and in many times in B2B SaaS, that's because they're building in the same domain again, right? But in consumer, never. I mean, we see so many incredible and famous and decorated consumer founders start their next thing and it flops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because when it comes to like B2B SaaS, it's like you're building the same product just over here. It's like it's the same
Yeah.
the same product. I'm just moving down the street,
Right.
and it's the same investors and same board members. Anyway, all right. What's the best thing you've ever been gifted?
Ooh. The best gifts for me are experiences.
Hmm.
So they're not necessarily like a physical object. Um, um, uh, and the problem is how many of them were actually really surprises, as opposed to like, hey, Raj, here's tickets to a magic show, or like, here's like, here's we're going on vacation together, but it's usually like together, like, like we're going to do this. I have to think about this some more. We're not great about exchanging birthday gifts in my household. So, I did have a VC. I had an investor once that used to have this great little startup he was using that would send an email on your birthday and say, hey, you can choose a gift out of this list. And had a bunch of little gifts, and I would get the quirkiest of toys in there. There was one toy I got that I thought was really cool. It was like an IoT device that would check your grip strength. So like you just squeeze this thing, and then there'd be an app on your phone and say what your grip strength was. And I took it to the gym. I used to do, I still do MMA jiu-jitsu. I took it to the gym, we're in like, because in jiu-jitsu you're doing a lot of grips, holding gis and whatnot, and like everyone's like kind of playing with it, like kind of measure their grip strength. Problem is the device itself was kind of small. It was kind of designed for a smaller frame, but Yeah, maybe that was one of the most intriguing gifts I'd ever received.
That's really cool, and that's a very interesting product because now there's like so much data out there with grip strength and like how long you're gonna like live.
Oh,
There's like
really?
a, there's
Oh,
a,
I
yeah there's a correlation between grip strength and total mortality or something like that, or like the chances
interesting.
of dementia. Yeah, the stronger your grip strength, the less chance you have for dementia. There's weird correlation. They're not obviously there's no causation or you can't really they haven't studied that yet, but at the time that right now that I've read, it's a lot of correlational stats. Yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, I lift weights at the gym, but I don't specifically do like forearm grip exercises, but maybe I should.
I mean I grew up with really small wrists. It's like genetic. So I was like I worked out forearms so hard because I was like I'm gonna wear a big watch and have big forearms so my wrists aren't noticeable.
Oh, that's so funny.
um,
That's so
but all right. And then the last FAQ, favorite book to gift, or just favorite book.
never gifted a book. So I don't read a lot of fiction. The most recent nonfiction book I'm reading right now is Super Communicators, and that's mostly just because with my product managers on my team, we're doing some group-wide exercises on how to improve persuasion as a competency. So I kind of have this model thesis that every role in an organization can be broken down into competencies. And so if you take think of like a video game character, you have like 70 attributes. If you think of like a great product manager, like what are those 70 attributes? And then we can like work on something together in a collaborative way across the team. So we've been focused on persuasion over the last like X weeks. And so we're reading the Super Communicators book together. Um, and I have a whole backlog of business books that I haven't read, just to be clear. I'm definitely in the camp of like, let me get the ChatGPT summary highlights. Because what I come to realize is I want to be aware, but I realize I still make the same mistake. So
Mm.
I've concluded that I'll read a book and it'll say, don't do this, don't do that. And I'll still go do this and do that because I don't internalize it until I do experience the pain myself.
Yeah,
And so it's changed how I think about books and podcasts in general.
yeah, I get that. I think there's a point that um, a lot of the books that people that read self help or read business books have read after a point that it's like it feels repetitive, but that's only because the information hasn't changed. It's just that you have to package it different ways for different people to get it. So it's like there's like a lull of people not reading as many over the last maybe like 4 years. But
I think there's a lot of content, right? There's an entire podcast ecosystem, there's a YouTube ecosystem, a creator ecosystem, a Twitter ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, right? So there's just a lot of content. And I think everybody's trying to self-brand. So people are coming up with their own frameworks, right? I mean, if you just listen to Lenny's podcast on product management, it's probably 1,500 different frameworks, right? But like in the end, what I always ask people, like we have to focus on the outcome. Like you go through all this, you learn all this, but is it improving the odds of success? Like, are we having a better result, right? And so that's the key here, like the outcomes. And I'm not sure outcomes are correlated with all of this stuff. Like it's good to be aware, but when I realized that, that's when I realized in the end that a lot of these things, whether it's reading a book or whether it's a podcast, are actually different forms of entertainment. And when you frame it that way, you think about it a lot differently. All right. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean you might not learn a nugget or two here or there. I'm not trying to imply that, but the primary purpose is entertainment.
Mhm. No, for sure. No, for sure. Because well, again, you can just make a list of do this as opposed to writing a book about it.
Yes.
And some people prefer that, but I think also it's like we also for people who read these things or are aware of these ecosystems a lot will view it differently than someone who's coming into it for the first time. Where like you read Atomic Habits for the first time
Yeah.
and you're like, holy shit, this is the best thing
Yeah.
I've ever read. Right? Like, oh my god, you're telling me I just have to keep doing it over and over. Who would have thought? Right? And it's
Right.
like if you're in the ecosystem, you're like, yeah, sure, like we get it. We know. Great. Mind you, Atomic Habits is a great book, but still, like, I digress. All right, awesome. So those are the FAQs. So, and I know you mentioned a few things, but is there anything you want to highlight in terms of what's next for you? What's next for Solo, for Mozilla?
Yeah. No, I mean, we're doing some great stuff with Firefox. You know, it's an amazing browser. So I'm gonna plug it here to the audience. If you have a small business or a side hustle you think about building, certainly if you have some coding chops, there's a lot of choices. But if you're looking for something really easy to get started, Solo is there, so you can check that out at soloist.ai. And then if people want to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter at Mobile Raj, Linktree at Mobile Raj, LinkedIn at Raj Singh. You can find me in different places. Happy to chat offline.
Awesome. I'm going to add that all to the show notes. And then is there anything you want to leave our listeners with as we sign off?
What do I leave them with? I mean, like a little incentive? Like,
any kind of message or
oh,
what you want to,
yeah,
last,
here, sure.
thought.
Yeah, for sure. I would say one of the most common questions I get, people will be like, hey, Raj, I have an idea, but I'm not going to work on it until like, I have my second kid or whatever, like, or until the stock gets like this price or who knows, right? And I always tell people, I'm like, dude, it's never a good time. Like, you just like, if the passion is there, it's not going to go away. Go get started. Like, I don't care if it's a dot-com crash. I don't care if it's the great financial crisis, the COVID crash. I don't know what current, what this, or, last 6 months, what maybe it was called, post-ZERP era crash, whatever. But like, it's never a good time. Like, if it's there, like, pursue it. I mean, I understand there's other requirements, like guardrails and responsibilities and whatnot. Requirements probably not the best word. But like, figure out a way. Like, can you do it on the side? Can you start building this? Like, because if it's there, it's going to hound you and it's never a good time. Like, just the best time is now.
That's awesome. All right. So with that, everybody listening at home, the best time is now.